Hey class, let's get started talking about 3D Studio Max. Of course, the welcome screen is really helpful in 3D Studio Max 2018, and I've already opened up the program to save time. Feel free to check all this stuff out, but I'm going to slowly introduce you to what I would call the essentials. There's so much to unpack here. Let's just be clear, there's a lot to unpack. It can be overwhelming, so it's probably in your best interest to really try to narrow your vision down to the things that I'm going to be teaching you. I know that I give you other videos to watch and that they are helpful, but I'm going to be pretty specific to the assignments in this class. So let's go ahead and get started. We have to get to understand the interface. So like it says here, you can see a whole bunch of stuff, but I'm just going to get down to what I think you want to know. So, and I am skipping over a lot of stuff that other videos will focus on, but one of the biggest things you want to know is how to draw anything, right? How to get it on screen. So, the way you do that is over here in this menu. These are all things you can draw on screen, but by default, geometry is selected. And if you want to draw any one of these, a sphere, you can come right out here, and it's best to start working in perspective view and just draw yourself a sphere. That's simple, right? Now, you want to move it. You want to be able to rotate it. You want to be able to scale it after you draw it. So, and you also want to be able to navigate. You're probably wondering why there's 4 screens happening right here. Well, don't worry about that. Let's focus on this one little screen that we're in, and we'll learn about those other guys later. So here are the 3 big boys that you want to remember in this class. They're right up here in this menu, and they're for moving objects, and the keystrokes for these are W, E, and R, but if you press select and move, guess what this is? This is your move tool. Now you've got 3 axes in here. You've got Z and X and Y. So you're either going to move on the Z, X, and Y, or all the above. So you hover over the arrows. There's other places to hover where you can move two axes or 3 axes at once. Don't even mess with that. At this point, you're probably sick of working in this little window, so I'm going to teach you a keystroke. Now, it's Alt-W. But you might be like, I can't remember that. So if you look over here, see where this little play-looking button is? These are viewport layout tabs. So if you click right here, you can turn on standard viewport layouts. All right? Now I had the wrong viewport selected, so I'm going to go back to the quad view by clicking on it, see? And I'll make sure I've got this guy selected, and again I'll click here. And it's showing me the quad I don't want. Great. Alright, so in this case, I thought it would show me the quad I had selected. I don't use this as often as I probably should. I always just press Alt-W. So in this case, I'm going to go back to quad view and try and give you another way to do the exact same thing. How about we just make this bigger? You just hover over the side. Then the other views don't have to change. At least you can see what you're doing. Because I want these other views to factor into what we're doing. They are handy, no doubt. And there's multiple views in here, by the way. In fact, this is my favorite view right here, is this guy. In fact, I don't always work in that view. All right, back in here. So how do you zoom in and out? I mean, that's a pretty big deal, right? Well, you just use your wheel mouse. So this is me turning my wheel mouse, zooming in and out. Yes, there's other ways to zoom, but let's just use this way. And then how do you pan around? The answer to that is you hold down the wheel mouse button, and you'll be able to see, you'll see a little hand here. But all that does is pan the screen. If you actually want to rotate around the object you have selected, you hold down the Alt key and you press that little mouse button, and you can do this. So let's practice this. You know, zoom in, zoom out, wheel mouse, press the wheel mouse down, and you can pan, hold down Alt in combination with that, and you can actually pan around almost like you're a little camera in the sky. All right, so I'm going to pull this guy up, and you'll notice over here, you're probably starting to figure this out. This guy right there, which I'm going to select, this is the top view, which I could switch to any view if I right click. This is the front, and this is the left. Now, all this stuff becomes very important. So these are called orthographic views. So these are straight up, straight on views of the left, the right, the top, the side, the bottom, all that. But this is the perspective view that you see me moving around with in here. Okay, so we can move things, and we're starting to understand the space that we're living in here. If we want this to sit on the floor here, you can see that base is right there. So if you wanted to find the very middle, you could just move this down and look in the front view until you hit the very bottom. Now there are other ways to do this, but I'm going to skip them for now. I'm resisting the urge to teach you lots of things. I don't want to overwhelm you. Because trust me, this program can get a little overwhelming. But right now you're probably like, this isn't too bad, right? All right, what about rotate? Now rotate's not going to mean much with this guy, so let's move him off. We want to rotate something else. How about a box? A box is a little different because you draw the base of the box first. There's two moves to it. And the second thing you do is you just kind of pull the box up. Just like that. When you're done, you just click. And there you go. So it's 2 clicks. I press Control Z there. That, first click, and then up, and then second click, and there we go. And before you let go of the box, it's worth mentioning, and we'll talk about it, that you can adjust the parameters over here of your box. Notice how I immediately ended up doing this, which is basically, I forget what they call these things in here, but they're like rollers or something where you can just left click and you can just make it bigger like this, or you can type it in, of course. I just do this stuff. Now if you right click, you can reset these back to 0, which is kind of cool. Alright, so right clicking, and some future class I'll remember the name of these things, but and these increments, don't even worry about them. They're just kind of made up increments. I'm not going to get into that. But I'm going to type in like 50, 50, 50, and then we get a perfect square, right? And yeah, it's too big. Let's talk about that. How do we resize this guy? And then it has segments. We'll get to those in a minute. Well, the way you can resize this guy is, or rotate this guy, let's start off there, is you can just click him, and there's a pivot point on him. You can see that pivot point is kind of in an odd spot. I kind of would think it would be in the middle, but it's not. But you can just click rotate, which is E. The W, R, and E is worth, or W, E, and R is worth remembering. And you can see I can rotate it on the X, Y, or the Z axis. We're used to X and Y with flat screens, but Z is that third axis. I'll spare you the math. But here we are, we're rotating it. I'm pressing Control Z to reverse it. And you might also notice right here that you've got coordinates you can move right down here at the bottom. These little spinners. Yeah, they're called spinners. That's what they're called. I don't know why that slipped my mind. I wasn't going to reset the video over that issue. And if you're unhappy, just right-click a spinner, and you can set it back to 0. Now that's only going to work while you have the tool active. And then let's do the obvious thing and go ahead and talk about transforms. So rotate, and then we've got the scale tool. So how does this work? This is different because, on the other ones I told you to press like on the Z or the Y and the X individually. I was just pressing Control Z to go backwards. But on this one, if you want to keep things uniform, just go in the middle of this triangle and push up, left click and pull up or pull down. So that's the trick to these guys. At this point, you're probably starting to think about the homework assignment that I have, where I tell you to lay a bunch of primitives on a plane, and it's not as intimidating as it was a minute ago, right? So let's go ahead. Look at this. We got two primitives, but they're not on a plane. What's a plane? Well, let's go over here to the top view, and I'll zoom out a little bit. Okay, we'll create like a little primitive picnic, I used to call it. So I'm going to click on the plane over here. This is another object, and just click and drag across like this, and you'll see a big old plane, right? And then I'll take my move tool, which you've kind of got used to, and I'll do this in the top window, and I'll just kind of center it up. I'm not going to try and do a perfect job at it, but here's my little plane, and if I wanted to, I could make it bigger, just like that. See, you can make it huge even, make it ginormous if you want, fill up the whole screen. Doesn't really matter. There's going to be some perimeter to it somewhere, but basically, there we go. Now I'm zooming in and out. You see how I almost got lost there for a minute. If that ever happens to you, if you ever have problems zooming in and out, you'll hear me repeat this in this class, but sometimes you get stuck. Press Z in the letter Z, and that sort of resets everything. It's a weird little trick I learned a long time ago. Now this is huge. I don't know why I made this thing so big. I think I'm losing my mind here. Let me shrink this down. This is nuts. Okay. All right. So obviously at this point you can probably figure out how you could get a cylinder out here, or you could get these other guys out here. Like a tube. Look at the tube. Big whoop, right? And that one has 3 steps to it, but you can practice with these. But I could draw any of these. There's even a teapot, which is a weird thing they have in here. It's kind of a 3dsMax staple. By the way, when you're done sizing something up, if you just right click, it's just kind of the default turning everything off. But WER is definitely what we do to resize and move stuff all the time. You're seeing how I'm just kind of doing it intuitively now. So how do we create a render? Because that's what you have to submit for your homework, right? So how do you render stuff out? All right, so let's talk about that. Go up here to rendering, you'll see the render button. Now there's a render button out here as well, but I just want you to remember Shift Q. Shift Q is just one of those guys you'll do all the time. And by default in here you've got a certain renderer set up. It's called a scanline renderer. We're not going to use it for most of the class, but we'll use it this week because we're all just kind of playing around. And I'll press Shift Q and render this out. So it's happening. It's just taking its sweet time. It's going to render out whatever window I have selected. So there it is. Looks like garbage, I won't lie, but that's what we're looking for. So this is just a low quality little image. It'll show me that you can at least get stuff on the plane. Now I know this doesn't cover everything you need to do for your homework just yet, but it's a great intro to the class, gives everybody something that they can do. We'll go deeper here in a minute in a different video. I hope you found this handy in getting started.